The rain poured relentlessly over the small village of Greystone, blanketing it in a veil of mist. At the heart of the village stood Blackstone Hall, an imposing mansion abandoned for decades. The townsfolk avoided it, whispering tales of curses and disappearances. But for the 5 young men huddled in a nearby tavern, it was the perfect site for an adventure. The Pact. "It's just a house," said Marcus, the group's unofficial leader, nursing his mug of hot cider. His brown eyes gleamed with excitement. "Nothing but old walls and creaky floors." "And maybe a ghost or two," quipped Simon, a wiry man with a sharp wit. "Or treasure," added Elias, the dreamer of the group. His imagination often ran wild, but tonight his theory piqued everyone's curiosity. Old places like that always have secrets. The remaining 2, Eric and Jonah, exchanged uncertain glances. Eric was a skeptic, preferring logic over superstition, while Jonah, the quietest of them all, had an intuition that often proved eerily accurate. "I'm in," Marcus declared, slapping the table. "What about you?" After some cajoling and a few wagers, the group made a pact. They would explore Blackstone Hall that very night. The arrival. The rain had eased by the time they reached the mansion. Its towering facade loomed against the night sky, the windows like empty eye sockets staring into the void. Vines twisted around the iron gates, and the air smelled of damp earth and decay. "This is a bad idea," Jonah muttered, his breath visible in the cold. "Relax," Marcus said, pushing open the gate. The hinges screeched, echoing into the stillness. "We'll be in and out." Elias held up a lantern, its warm glow piercing the darkness. "Let's see what's inside." The first floor. The front door creaked open, revealing a grand foyer coated in dust and cobwebs. A massive chandelier hung precariously overhead, its crystals dull with grime. "Look at this place," Simon said, his voice hushed. "It's like stepping into another world." They spread out, their footsteps muffled by a threadbare carpet. The air felt heavy, as though the house itself was watching them. Elias wandered into the parlor, where faded portraits of stern-faced men lined the walls. "These must be the owners," he mused. One portrait, however, was missing, leaving behind an empty frame. "Creepy," Eric muttered, joining him. In the dining room, Jonah found a long table set for a feast, complete with tarnished silverware and rotting food. "This doesn't make sense," he whispered. "Who would leave this behind?" Marcus, meanwhile, discovered a staircase leading to the upper floors. "Guys, over here." The locked door. The second floor was a labyrinth of hallways and rooms, most of them empty or filled with decaying furniture. But one door, at the far end of the hall, was locked. Marcus jiggled the handle. "Help me break it down." Eric stepped forward, skepticism giving way to curiosity. "Why? It's probably just a storage closet." "Or something valuable," Elias suggested. With a collective effort, they forced the door open. Inside was a study, its walls lined with bookshelves. A massive desk stood in the center, its surface cluttered with papers and a peculiar black box. "Finally, something interesting," Marcus said, reaching for the box. The black box. The box was cold to the touch, made of a material none of them could identify. A strange symbol was etched into its surface, a circle with intersecting lines and an eye at its center. "What do you think it is?" Simon asked. "A puzzle box, maybe," Elias guessed. "Or a safe." Jonah frowned. "It feels wrong." But Marcus ignored him, turning the box over in his hands. As he did, a faint hum filled the room, and the symbol began to glow. "Put it down!" Jonah shouted, but it was too late. The box clicked open, releasing a burst of energy that knocked them all to the floor. The shift. When they regained their senses, the room had changed. The bookshelves were now filled with pristine volumes, and the desk was free of dust. A fire crackled in the hearth, casting flickering shadows on the walls. "What just happened?" Eric asked, his voice trembling. "It's like we've traveled back in time," Elias said, marveling at the transformation. The door to the study creaked open, and a figure stepped inside. It was a man, dressed in an old-fashioned suit, with piercing eyes that seemed to look right through them. "You shouldn't be here," he said, his voice cold and commanding. The Keeper. The man introduced himself as the keeper of Blackstone Hall. His duty, he explained, was to guard the box, which held a fragment of time itself. "You have disrupted the balance," he said, glaring at Marcus. "The box is not a toy." "We didn't know," Marcus protested. "We were just curious." "Curiosity has consequences," the keeper replied. "You must fix what you've broken." "What do we need to do?" Jonah asked. The keeper gestured to the box, now glowing faintly on the desk. "Return it to its original state. But be warned, the house will resist you." The trial. As they left the study, the house seemed to come alive. Doors slammed shut, walls shifted, and the temperature plummeted. Shadows danced in the corners, and whispers echoed through the halls. "This is insane," Simon said, his bravado crumbling. "We're trapped." "We can do this," Marcus said, though his confidence wavered. "Stick together." Guided by cryptic symbols that appeared on the walls, they navigated the mansion, solving puzzles and facing challenges. In one room, they had to arrange mirrors to reflect light onto a symbol. In another, they deciphered an ancient riddle. Each task brought them closer to restoring the box, but tested their resolve. The final confrontation. After hours of trial and error, they returned to the study. The box now pulsed with a steady light, but the keeper was nowhere to be seen. "What now?" Elias asked. The box began to shake, emitting a low growl. Suddenly, a shadowy figure emerged from it, a manifestation of the chaos they had unleashed. "We have to seal it," Jonah said, his intuition guiding him. Working together, they recited the incantations they had found in the keeper's books. The shadow fought back, its tendrils lashing out, but their determination held firm. Finally, with a blinding flash, the box snapped shut. The return. When the light faded, they were back in the dusty, decaying study. The fire was gone, and the bookshelves were empty once more. "It's over," Marcus said, his voice heavy with relief. The box was now inert, its glow extinguished. Jonah placed it back on the desk and stepped away. As they left the mansion, the rain had stopped, and the first light of dawn painted the horizon. Blackstone Hall stood silent and foreboding behind them, its secrets locked away once more. "Let's never do that again," Simon said, breaking the silence. "For once I agree," Marcus replied. And with that, they walked back to the village, forever changed by the enigma of Blackstone Hall. In the heart of the bustling city of Amberton stood a quaint little shop called Harrow's Timepieces. For over 5 decades, Mr. Arthur Harrow, a meticulous and enigmatic clockmaker, had repaired, crafted, and sold the finest clocks. The shop was as much a part of the city as its cobblestone streets, yet few people ever stepped inside. Its windows displayed an array of clocks, from intricate pocket watches to towering grandfather clocks, all ticking in perfect harmony. But among those who lived in Amberton, a peculiar rumor surrounded Harrow's timepieces. Anyone who tampered with its largest clock, the eternity clock, was said to disappear forever. The curious customer. One rainy afternoon, 4 young men, friends since childhood, stood outside the shop, their curiosity piqued. "Have you heard the stories?" asked Alex, the most adventurous of the group. His hazel eyes gleamed with excitement as he pushed his damp hair out of his face. About the clock? Replied Nathan, a pragmatic and skeptical soul. It's just an old wives' tale. No one really knows, said Jonah, the most superstitious among them. His hands were shoved deep into his coat pockets, his voice a whisper. But they say it controls time itself. James, the quietest of the group, stared through the shop's foggy window. Let's find out. Without waiting for a consensus, Alex opened the door, and the others reluctantly followed. Inside the shop. The interior of Harrow's timepieces was dimly lit, the scent of wood polish and metal filling the air. Hundreds of clocks ticked in unison, creating a hypnotic rhythm. In the center of the room stood the eternity clock, a masterpiece unlike any other. It was a massive creation, its golden gears visible through a crystal casing, with Roman numerals carved in perfect precision. Beautiful, isn't it? Said a gravelly voice. The four friends turned to see Mr. Harrow himself, a thin man with sharp features, silver hair, and piercing blue eyes. He wore a tailored vest, and a pocket watch chain glinted against his chest. Admiring my work? He asked, his gaze falling on the eternity clock. We were curious, Alex said boldly. Is it true what they say about this clock? Harrow smiled, though there was no warmth in it. What have you heard? That it can control time, Jonah blurted out, and that people who touch it disappear. Harrow chuckled softly. Stories. People love their stories. Is it true, though? James asked, his voice steady but his eyes wary. Harrow's smile faded. Time is not something to be trifled with, gentlemen. Now, unless you're here to buy or repair a clock, I suggest you leave. A reckless choice. The four exchanged glances as Harrow retreated into a back room. We have to see if it's real, Alex whispered. Are you insane? Jonah hissed. He just warned us. It's just a clock, Nathan said, though his voice lacked conviction. Before anyone could stop him, Alex stepped forward and placed his hand on the eternity clock's smooth surface. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the clock's gears began to spin faster, its ticking growing louder and more erratic. Alex, stop! James shouted. But it was too late. A blinding flash engulfed the room, and when the light subsided, the four friends found themselves somewhere entirely different. The empty city. They stood in the middle of Amberton, but it was not the Amberton they knew. The streets were deserted, the buildings shrouded in a gray mist. Clocks of all shapes and sizes floated in the air, their hands spinning wildly. What is this place? Jonah stammered, his voice echoing unnaturally. It's like we're in some kind of limbo, Nathan said, his scientific mind struggling to process their surroundings. Look. Alex pointed to a figure in the distance. It was Harrow, walking with purpose toward a massive clock tower that loomed over the city. We need answers, James said, and they followed. The truth revealed. Inside the clock tower, Harrow stood before a colossal mechanism. Its gears were larger than any machine they had ever seen, and its pendulum swung with a deep, resonant hum. You shouldn't be here, Harrow said without turning around. What is this place? Alex demanded. What did you do to us? Harrow sighed and faced them. This is the realm of time, where I maintain the balance. By touching the eternity clock, you disrupted that balance. What does that mean? Nathan asked, his voice trembling. It means, Harrow said, that you've set events in motion that could unravel time itself. The task Harrow explained that the eternity clock was no ordinary timepiece. It was a conduit between the mortal world and the fabric of time. By tampering with it, they had fractured time's flow. There's only one way to fix it, Harrow said. You must find the 4 time keys scattered across this realm and return them here. Only then can the balance be restored. What happens if we fail? Jonah asked. Harrow's gaze hardened. Then time will collapse, and so will everything within it, including you. The first key. The group ventured into the misty expanse, each step feeling heavier than the last. Their first destination was a floating library where books wrote themselves in mid-air. The key has to be here, Nathan said, scanning the space. The library's guardian appeared, a spectral figure that demanded they solve a riddle. After a tense exchange of wits, James deciphered the answer, and the first key, a glowing silver object, materialized. The second key. The second key was hidden in a labyrinth of shifting gears. Navigating it required teamwork and trust. Jonah, despite his fear, proved instrumental in finding the way, and they retrieved the second key, a bronze sphere. The third key. The third key lay at the heart of a frozen lake. Breaking through the ice, Alex swam to retrieve it, his determination unwavering. The key, shaped like a crystalline shard, glowed brightly as he emerged from the water. The final key. The last key was guarded by a massive clockwork sentinel. It tested their resolve, forcing each of them to confront their deepest fears. Together, they overcame the challenge, and the golden fourth key was theirs. Restoring the balance back at the clock tower, Harrow stood waiting. The group placed the keys into the mechanism, and the tower roared to life. The gears spun faster, the pendulum swung wildly, and the mist began to dissipate. "You've done well," Harrow said, "but the final step requires a sacrifice." "What kind of sacrifice?" James asked warily. "One of you must remain here to serve as the keeper, ensuring the balance is never disrupted again." The choice. The friends fell silent. Finally, Alex stepped forward. "This is my fault," he said. "I'll stay." "No," Jonah said. "We all made this choice together." Nathan nodded. "We can't let you do this alone." Harrow watched as the four debated, his expression unreadable. Finally, he raised a hand. "Enough. Your unity has restored the balance as much as the keys. None of you will need to stay." The return. The light engulfed them once more, and they awoke in Harrow's shop, the eternity clock silent and still. "It's over," Jonah whispered. Harrow stood by the door, his expression softer than before. "You've proven yourselves, but remember this. Time is precious. Do not waste it." As they stepped into the bustling streets of Amberton, the clocks struck noon, their chimes ringing with a new clarity. The four friends walked away, forever changed, each carrying the weight of their adventure and a newfound appreciation for the fragile nature of time.